Good morning, everyone. Happy day after the election. This is Beth Guide with Talking Purple, and I want to jump right in and I want to talk about some of the things that happen because I think there's a lot of things that we can glean from the election yesterday and some of the things. So, first of all, I want to run down some of the things that happened. Here in Texas, all 17 of the ballot propositions passed. I know we had said no about creating some of this district and some of the things that we had talked about, but all of them passed. I would rather have it be that way than all of them not pass. The bond reform one had overwhelming support, which means that judges now, in certain circumstances, cannot release certain types of crime just back on their own reconnaissance, which is something that was happening here. And then those people were leaving, they're committing other crimes. So this bond reform piece passed overwhelmingly with about 80%. And I thought that was really good, as did property tax reduction. Go us. Here in Harris County, we had about roughly, give or take, about 3 million people that voted. There's a lot of people that live in Harris County, so it's not as great of a turnout as what you would have wanted, but be that as it may. We have a couple races that are now heading towards runoffs. So that's going on, and in both the race cases, in both of those races, there are going to be two Democrats in those races, and we will talk about them, and we're going to go ahead and cover them as time goes on. Dwight Boykin, for the city of Houston, he took the top spot for that open seat. So he's the one that's leading the pack on that, and he isn't going to be in a runoff, but it's I think he's going to go on to clear sailing, and we'll talk about that. The other one that I really want to look at a little bit harder is this Sheila Jackson Lee, Sylvester Turner seat. It ended up with Christian Menefee, which is our Harris County attorney, and Amanda Edwards, who's a former Houston City Council person. What I will say is that Carmen Montiel did come in fourth, but it was a very small percentage of the vote in that district. So we're not getting into those districts with the right messaging, I think, for the districts that we're looking to serve. Um, I was very disappointed in that George Foreman only got 800. I think he got 848 votes or something that I saw go by. So it was a very small vote total, but he was not out there. And I actually would encourage him in the future to run as a Republican. I think it would serve him better. It would help him trying to spit the bit and saying that he can't run as a Republican and had to run as an independent, I think actually hurt him. So I would advise that. Um, Let me see, what else am I missing here in Texas? So I think for us, for Harris County, I think that's a solid where we are. And we're going to talk about these two races as they go through their runoff elections. That will be happening. Dates haven't been announced yet, but they are coming. And once they're announced, we'll let everybody know. And that way we can, especially in the city of Houston race, I will say that Mr. Boykin, he's a great candidate. I had said that in my other podcasts that I've given on this subject. So I don't have a problem with him. And we'll go through and we'll look at this and we'll let everybody, kind of weigh in on that. Just because we've got two Democrats running, I strongly, strongly encourage everybody to continue. You need to get out and vote and make sure good people get in spots. What I'm going to say next, I am nationally, this election was extremely interesting, and to look at it in a post, with hindsight now, and I think we'll be unpacking this more as time goes on. But I think what I want to say is, first of all, Donald Trump wasn't on the ballot, and because he wasn't on the ballot, Republicans slid. But there's a reason for that, and we're going to talk about why that happened. Um, the other thing that I think, and see, this is to me, everything, people should do things honestly and not play tricks because people go to work every day. People have to pay attention to their families. People have loved ones in the hospital. What I'm saying is life happens. So they get these clips off the regular news or see something go by in social media. I think that as we start to gain our footing as a podcast, I think the biggest thing that I can do is help keep social media balanced. And what I'm doing is I'm seeing that in my own scroll that I have Democrat posts and I have Republican posts. So it means that I'm kind of meeting that benchmark because I'm not going too far in either direction with stuff. I have a really big problem with shutting down the government. And now all of a sudden this morning, everybody had an epiphany that they're ready to reopen the government. So what this implies to me is that one of the parties decided to shut down the government and purposely inflict pain on Americans so that they could win elections. And I think that is morally bankrupt. That's just my opinion. Why would you do that? Why is having power and winning, why can you not win elections based on ideas? Why can you not win? Why do we have to have a false narrative? So again, that government shutdown was because of Democrats. Procedurally, we did not have enough votes to overcome a filibuster to keep the government open. And I say we because that's the other side, the Republicans, the people that wanted to keep it open. Though we did not have enough votes to do that. We could change the rules, okay? And neither side has been willing to change the rules, the parliamentary rules that are not in the Constitution that require 60% of or excuse me, 60 votes to stop a filibuster. Okay? So if you want to say that Republicans could have changed this, yeah, they could change this. And they could take away the filibuster rule, which makes everything a simple majority. Everybody's been reluctant to do that. And frankly, they've been reluctant to do that. They were reluctant to do it on the Biden side as well, or when in the Democrat side in Democrat administrations. They've not pushed to take it away. And that you'll hear it referred to as the nuclear option and so on and so forth. As much as I don't like this with what I'm going to say, because I think that the minority party always needs to have a voice in government, maybe it's time to look at taking that 60 votes away and just having it be what it should be, which is 50 plus one, because that's how many you would need to have a majority. And the reason I say that is because we're doing things by executive fiat. The previous administrations have done things by executive fiat. You know, um, Obama said he has a pen and a cell phone. He basically can make whatever he wants in the form of an executive order. And as much as the Democrats are upset by what Donald Trump is doing, he's doing no different than what Barack Obama did if you really wanted to call balls and strikes. And I try to call balls and strikes in everything I do. So when I look at all of this, if they come to the table now and that government shutdown stops now after election day, this was purposely done to mislead what we like to call as low information voters, low propensity voters, people that don't pay attention because they can't, because life happens. Um, Somebody called me yesterday and said, "What's the status of the election?" And I said, "Well, you know what? I don't even really know because I had people in my office, I had clients, and we had just a day of all days yesterday. It was extremely busy. So I didn't get to sit down until after the polls closed at 7 o'clock. And I'm kind of glad I didn't because I don't, the rhetoric leading up to that is different than what you get, post-election. The other thing that I find to be fascinating, so I'm going to say that the number one reason that we had a wipeout yesterday for the Republicans, because that's in essence what happened, was that. So I'm going to attribute one of it to the Democrat shutdown and to the filibuster, because people really did not understand this tested mantra of, well, the Republicans have 51 votes and they could have stopped this. Although it's true, I will say it absolutely is true. It would have required the change of rules, um, that I think both parties historically have shied away from changing, and I think maybe to the good. But if you're going to do something, and own it, which is what the Democrats aren't doing. They don't want to own that shutdown. They want to point their fingers and say, well, they can go fix it. They're starving children. They're causing airplanes, all of that. And it's nonsense. It's rhetoric. Both sides are to blame. And let's like not pretend otherwise. Um, I actually think the Republicans, by not changing the rules, showed restraint. And I'm starting to hear people say, if you want to get your legislative agenda through, now would be the time to do it. Remove the rule and just let it all fly. And I think if I was on the other end of that side, there would be times that that would happen and things would do. It's just like Obamacare. Obamacare was ushered in under a reconciliation process because they knew they didn't have the rules to overcome it. Um, with this 60 filibuster, so they used reconciliation process and they pushed Obamacare through with a simple majority, pretty much. So why don't we just be transparent and get rid of it? If you want to filibuster something, then you have to stand there and until you fall over it, and then we'll go forward. But let's go. I'm really kind of thinking now, maybe let's just get rid of this because it's being used as a political tactic, and I think it's a political tactic that really misled people as to what's going on. So unless you're really up on civics and you understand how this all works, and we've had, and this becomes another whole podcast, but we've had a 30-year at least de-emphasis on civics and government and how the government works. The public school system has done the country at large a disservice because they're not educating people to think critically. They're not educating people with the way the world works so that you don't fall for this. And the reason I say all of this is, so I'm looking at New Jersey. I've been very clear with everybody that I'm from New Jersey. I live in New Jersey. That's where I started I lived there for the first 20 years of my life. Um, and I still have some strong ties into New Jersey. Okay. And when I look at the numbers on that, just on a precursory, first of all, do I really believe that all of Newark came out to vote for Mickey Sherrill? On the surface, I would say no. But then if I start to think about, well, they're out there wondering where their SNAP benefits are, and they're hearing about airplanes and airports, and the airports in Newark, Liberty's there in that neighborhood. I half wonder if that the general consensus is, let's put the Democrats in. Maybe they can undo this government shutdown. Maybe they can get our jobs back. Maybe they can get SNAP back. And they just went in the opposite direction to do that. So that's why they all came out, because they needed their benefits. And they thought, well, if I come and I vote on the Democrat side, maybe they can remove this, because all they've been hearing is the Republicans are at fault. But this is where this goes back to social media. And I really think that we need things out there that help balance, because the social media problems that I see is that if I look for information of when am I going to get my SNAP benefits back? How come the SNAP benefits got cut off? The news is saying over and over and over, well, it's the Republicans' fault. So why would I go vote for a Republican if I don't have my SNAP benefits, because if I go and look at what I would think would be legitimate news sources or legitimate places to do research, they're all saying it's the Republicans' fault. On the other side, if I am a Republican and I'm out there and I'm looking for some of this, I'm going to get served messaging that says it's the Democrats' fault. So you continue to be served with the same information instead of critical and critically thought out information. And I think this is where I come back and I say, I feel like I have a very important thing to do here. Because I understand and I've been taught to think critically. I think being a journalist in a day and age where being unbiased and trying to represent both sides is going to serve me well. I don't think journalists are trained that way anymore. But I went to journalism school in the 80s and we were still taught to try to be unbiased and to give both sides of the story and not to be the story, to choose words that do not convey a thought and a feeling. I don't think, even as I say that, not only are they not taught that anymore, I don't know that they understand that there's biased words. I could just randomly, we'll have pull up a headline. In fact, I may just start adding that to a segment that's called Pull Up a Headline, and we'll start to look at some of this. Because when I read headlines in the newspaper, which is what people read, is the headlines and the subheads. Okay, many of them are extremely biased in what they're saying. They're not reporting the news, they're giving an opinion. So news has become an opinion piece couched in the discussion of it being news. The whole problem is nobody knows what the truth is, and the other side is not represented. And in all situations, the truth lies in the middle. It's not all one way, it's not all the other way. The truth is in the middle. I have a really big problem with not presenting well-rounded information to people so that they can make a right decision and that they understand it's okay to disagree, that not everybody's all right and not everybody's all wrong. I feel like that's what we have going on here. So that's one of the things that I really, the fact that we're going to end the government shutdown one day after election day or 2 days after election day, that just says the Democrats did this to cause a problem so that they won elections. I have a really big problem with that. Um, I just think it's wrong. And that's not a good thing. I think the other thing is if you started to ask people on a regular basis some questions, you would find that the truth and their opinions are in the middle. Just like property tax, at 80% of the vote voted in favor of capping, or excuse me, extending the deduction on a house to $140,000 here in Harris County. People agree also that we should have Alzheimer's research and dementia research. We are more alike in places than we're different, but the places that we're different, some of these are just chasmly different, and I think like chasms, like big ditches difference. And when you look at why people do that, challenge people, ask them why they think the way they do. And when you hear their answer, don't argue their answer with them, internalize it, and then figure out whether you agree with it or not. On the surface, nobody agrees with taking money away from people that need government support to put food on their table. Nobody disagrees with that on the surface. But then you start to look at it and you say, okay, are these people able to work? Are they able to, or are they coming up with ways to extend that? Are they working the system? Are they here legally? There's a lot of different factors that when you start to look at that, you go, hey, somebody needs to retool this, because just like you wouldn't do this with your own personal money, why is it okay with taxpayer money? Well, because you don't see yourself as a taxpayer. You get a refund every year, so you're not quote unquote a taxpayer. So you don't see it. Somebody else's money, it's somebody else's problem. And I mean, these are the things that you kind of you start to look at and you go. And as far as Donald Trump goes, and Zohan Mondami, we'll add him on the pile because we're going to talk about him here in a minute too. They're giving out populist principles. Now, granted, the ways to get these things accomplished are extremely different. Okay. But the ideals are the same. So now the Democrats are going to start to talk like populists without people understanding how do you get there. Donald Trump wants to talk as populist, but the rest of the Republican Party wants to go be their. I'll save that just for a second. I'll finish that sentence in a second. But the Republican Party is not. They're having this in a different way. So let's talk about the Republican Party for a second here. There's two factions of the Republican Party, okay? And they need to get to where we lock arms and everybody works together and stop cannibalizing their own. The other thing we're going to talk about is the consultant class. And, my goal in life is to get to be a political consultant and to win elections. The problem that I'm having and that I see, and I think this is a mindset. I think that this is I'd say right brain, left brain, math problem, English. So there's creative functions and there's analytical functions in everybody's brain. And theoretically, the Republican side is way more analytical, and the Democrat side is pretty much way more based on emotion and how you feel. And I mean that's the difference in people and the difference in the way you structure things. The Republican Party needs to embrace things that they don't necessarily agree with publicly. The idea of I'd rather die on a hill and lose versus I'd rather win and then bring about a change. I can't tell you how many times I hear within Republican circles, well, I'm just going to stick to my principles. And I'm going to stick to my principles. I don't care what happens because I'm going to stick to my principles. And although I agree with sticking to your principles 100%, there's big principles and there's little principles. And you have to understand that you have to have a role to bring about a change. I personally am very much against this whole transgender ideology. Someday we'll have a whole discussion of what my viewpoint is on it and why today's not the day. This is an election discussion. I will never back off of what I have to say because of who I am and my journey in life. I will never back off what I have to say on it. But I fully understand that messaging and how I get there is extremely important because people's lives are on the line. And that's not hyperbole on my part. I also understand that money has entered the transgender industry and that because it has, some of the safeguards that were put in place have been removed. I'm willing to go out there and speak on this and talk on this because it needs to happen. I'm going to work towards bringing that about. But the bigger thing is I need to get people around me. We need to have people around me or around that don't agree with this and that want to bring. You don't go out and pick an issue. And I'm going to say like abortion and stick to it so hard to the discredit of every other thing else around you. And it's funny. I mentioned Rush Limbaugh all the way along, like a lot. I mean, admittedly I listened to him since I was in my 20s, and he would also often say that some people would abortion's wrong. I don't want abortion. I'm not for abortion. But I'm also not going to go so far extreme that I throw out the entire rest of the country and the principles of the country over one issue. I think we need to work together and we need to not ostracize people. I see the Democrats doing it on the other side too, because sometimes if you're a pro-life Democrat, that doesn't play well either. So there has been that. But in election time, they know their precincts and they know their people. Connor Lamb is a great example of that. He was in, I think, the Pittsburgh area to be a senator, and he was a pro-life Democrat. It was more important for them to have a Democrat in that seat, so he was pro-life, than it was for them to have a pro-choice person that couldn't win the election. We need to look at these things. Winning elections is how you bring about the changes. Dying on hills and dying on principle is not the right path, in my opinion. Now, why I say all of this is because the other thing that I see when I look at the election and the election that the election results is that the people that lost and the people that lost big were advised to stay away from Donald Trump. Donald Trump bad. Okay? I don't think Donald Trump's bad. I don't think Donald Trump's principles and stuff are bad. I'm from New Jersey, so I understand some of the stuff he does. I get that the middle of the country doesn't always understand a New York sense of humor. I've been fighting it in the South since I moved here because I have a New York sense of humor. I always will have a New York sense of humor. And because I do, I offend half the people around me. And you know what? I think it's funny. And sometimes I even troll them because I think it's funny. I mean, it just is, it's awesome. Okay, as the president of the United States, maybe it's not so awesome, maybe it is. I don't know. But his principles are right. The things that if I just took the label of Donald Trump off of things, it's funny because everybody says we don't like MAGA. MAGA says make America great. Okay? Managed decline is not the way to run a country. So every time you say you don't like MAGA, are you saying you don't think America should be great? I mean, these are questions. They're not, there's not a, but how can you be against making America great? How can anybody be against that? Now, how we get there, of course, that's a completely different discussion. But you don't walk away from the guy that mopped the floor with the Democrats 1 year ago today and then wonder why you lost the election. And I'm gonna call Glenn Youngkin out here a second in Virginia because and I'm gonna tell you my opinion. I've always thought the guy was milquetoast to start with. I didn't look at him as anybody of any. So what did he do? He put another milquetoast candidate in and she lost by 10 plus points. It can't. I don't even know what you do with that. But it's a misread on where the country is and where the country wants to go. Okay? The country wants good wages. Country doesn't want inflation. The country doesn't want to be overrun with illegals. Okay? Again, as I say that, I'm going to remind you that I am a naturalized American citizen. We did it legally. We did not do it illegally. The country probably, and I right or wrong, wants the DACA kids to have a path to citizenship. Put it in, do it. Stop talking about it. This transgender stuff, I don't think anybody, if you just walked up to somebody on the street and asked if they know the difference between a man and a woman, I think 90% of the people would say yes. 100% of the people should say yes, they know. But in this weird world, everybody knows there's a difference between a man and a woman. Just because you change your hormones and have your body reconstructed in a different way, some of the physiological things that make us different don't go away. We don't grow extra ribs. We don't grow extra muscle mass. We don't lose muscle mass. You don't lose a rib. I mean, there's just physiological differences that don't change skeletally, physically, because we're on hormones and or because of we've had constructive surgery. It's okay to say that. And I'm in a position that I can say that. Okay. And again, like I said, that's a whole podcast on itself. Um, but most people don't want this preached to their children. It's not being insensitive. It's not being, you talk to your own kids about your own life and the way they are. That's the way it should be. You set the tone and tenor for your kids. Society shouldn't be setting the tone and tenor for your kids. Things should not be being hidden from parents. And that's another thing. Parental rights took a hit. In Virginia, the reason Youngkin won in the first place was parental rights. Now all of a sudden, we're going to go in the opposite direction. And I think the thing is that although my I can hear my dad saying people don't think right and don't do things right. The fact of the matter is, I think people don't take a full look because there's not something out there to help them take a full look. This is what you're getting when you vote for this person. I don't care what anybody says. This is what they've said. This is how they've said it. And that brings us to Mandami. He's another one. It's great. He is for years wanted to defund the police. I grew up in New York City in the 70s and the 80s where police struggled. I remember when 42nd Street didn't have a car coming out of the top of the building and Rockettes dancing up and down the streets. They had hookers up and down the streets and triple X movies blinking in the windows. Okay, so I go and I look at Times Square and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe because I have the mental image of what it used to be when I was a kid when you get off the bus at the Port Authority. So I don't know what you're talking about at 33 years old, talking about defunding police and thinking you can live in a world with no police. Because if there's no laws, there's no order, there's no civilization, it breaks down. And that's what you're prescribing to. Now, City of Houston was kind of funny this morning. They ran an ad they ran a Twitter post or X post, whatever you want to call it, uh, asking for the New York City police to fly down here. They want police. They want police here. So they did that. I think that was great. But don't bring your New York value system here and think we're going to go act like that. And that's the other thing I don't understand. You leave these places because you don't like what's going on, but you continue to vote for the same thing. And then you leave and then you come here and try to vote for it. You guys need to sit down. Everybody needs to sit down and say what is important to them and what is not important to them, and actually understand that if I can do anything to help cut through that noise, I'm going to do it. I think the consultants are abhorrently wrong for advising any client to stay away from Donald Trump or their policies of Donald Trump. I don't care what Twitter says. I don't care what Facebook says because the algorithms are gearing your scrolls to mimic your thought process. So you never hear the other side. And I guarantee you, the core principles that won Donald Trump that election are just as important today as they were a year ago. People want to raise their children in safe neighborhoods. People want to raise their children and send them to school and have confidence that the school is educating them in reading and writing and arithmetic and not gender studies and transgenderism and all these off the track things. Teach them to read, teach them to write, and teach them to do math. That's where your job is. That's what parents want. They don't want all this other stuff. They don't want and whether it's right or wrong, and they want to abdicate their parental rights to the school district, they want to be able to trust the education system and be able to put their kids in a school that their kid is actually learning something. The other thing is we talk about reading, writing, and arithmetic. I'm going to say history. We need to be able to teach the history of this country in a manner that we understand what's going on, that we understand the value of the Constitution, that we understand that why we are the people that we are. Explain how government functions, explain how to vote, because we're not doing that anymore. And it's funny because, and I, again, I'm all cards on the table. I'm a product of private school. My mother and father, when I was in, I guess when I start kindergarten, 1972, the school I was going to, we had gone overseas and went to Milan with Exxon for a little bit. So I did kindergarten and half of first grade in Milan. And when we came back to the United States, the school that I started kindergarten in, which was Lafayette School at in Wayne, New Jersey, um, had gone to an open classroom, which meant you just go to class and whatever you wanted to do that day, you could do. And if you wanted to work on learning to read, you could work on, and if you just wanted to eat paste in the corner, go eat paste in the corner. And by the way, that's what 4 year olds did in the 70s. Now we're having discussions with a 4 year old that they're still figuring out whether they like to taste the paste or not. But with that said, by the time we got to, so they took me and they put me in a private school, and my parents made a lot of sacrifices to do that. We did what we did. My parents did a yeoman job of making sure that we were educated. My mother really wanted to make sure we were educated. The thing is by the fourth grade, I had my one of my best friends to this day. They're still my friends since fourth grade. They came over because it took their parents a couple extra years to recognize that their kid was not going to learn in a open classroom circumstance where you just did whatever you wanted. So they ended up coming over, and they had a hard, fourth and fifth grade to try to get up into par, to be on par with the rest of the grade levels, because you were lacking the education that you needed to do that. Okay. So we need to teach our kids. I think these are core principles of the United States. This is not a party thing. The problem is that the parties have come in and they've co-opted some of this, and everybody's like working towards, I don't even know what. Nobody wants to live in an unsafe neighborhood. Anybody that creates rules and laws and does not help a neighborhood to be safe, shame on you. Criminal rights should not be elevated above law-abiding citizens' rights. And yet we have an entire system right now and party in this country that seems to care more about the perpetrator of the crime than the victim of the crime. These people are sitting at their Thanksgiving tables missing somebody because somebody had the temerity to go take somebody's life. That is not right. You do not elevate the criminal above the victim in no circumstances. You don't let them out because you think they shouldn't have been arrested. You don't let them out on a no money bond, on release them on their own reconnaissance. You don't do that because they've already demonstrated that they don't really like the law too much. So when they demonstrate that, you don't embrace it and say, "Here, go fly, be free." Do I think there's people that are wrongly persecuted out there? Probably so. I'm not as tone deaf to not understand that. But when somebody's standing over the body with a bloody knife, looking down at it, I understand the presumption of his innocence, yet don't let them go on their own recognizance in the hopes that they're going to show back up. We have people in this country cheering the murder of people. And what I mean when I say that is we have the Charlie Kirk situation. There's people that were cheering that. And yet there's two children that are not going to have their father at Christmas this year. Do you want that to be you? All else aside. You guys, the Luis Mangione guy too. Why are we celebrating a guy because the CEO of a company said, "Oh, we're gonna fix the we don't we're running our company in accordance with healthcare the way it." Hello, the whole healthcare system is broken. Obamacare made it worse. Go be productive and fix the system. Don't go shoot some guy in the street in the back of his head for what? Because he of his job? Because you don't like what he says? And then we have people celebrating that. Up there, that guy got what was coming to him. Look, life is precious. We belong working within that construct, and we should value that a little bit more. And I understand this is a long tirade I'm on here a little bit, but I look at this and anybody advising Republican candidates to run from the president of the United States should not be a strategist. But here's what I do know, and here's what I think. Okay? These strategists take clients. They may not be aligned with those clients. They may not be aligned with the viewpoint of those clients. The people hiring the consultants, you need to hire consultants that mimic your viewpoint. You need to get to know them and understand what they do. Somebody hires me, all cards on the table. I'm a Republican precinct chair. Okay. I go to Republican clubs and I've been around the Republican Party since I graduated. Well, I shouldn't say since I graduated college because I really was a Democrat when I came out of college. Actually, I think I'm the same person. I think the Democrat Party left me, to be honest, which is why being in the middle has been so easy for me because I've always just been where I'm standing. It's just that I can't go and support somebody that doesn't support children and that wants to, that I mean, I just have a list a mile long of why as the further left the Democrat Party goes, the worse it gets. I used to think Chuck Schumer was a pretty reasonable guy and pretty centrist. I don't think that anymore because he's gotten sucked into the tide to move over. He's an example of that. Mario Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo's dad, I've always had a good viewpoint of him. Ed Koch had a great viewpoint of him. David Dinkins, not so much. Um, but understand where these people are. If they're advising you to do something that you do not agree with, don't do it. Fire them. Don't think they know better than you. That's all these people that said run away from Trump. Trump won the election. Don't listen to Twitter for your political news. Look around you and see. Go talk to people. In fact, I'm working with a person. I told them, I said, go out. You're going to go into a Democrat neighborhood. I said, you ask them whether they're happy and they feel safe in their neighborhood. And you ask them about crime and crime issues. I said, because Republican or Democrat, nobody wants to live in an unsafe neighborhood. And the fact that we have people that condone this and elevate this, I don't care what party you are, that needs to stop. So I said, if you want to go do this, go out and start asking questions about crime. I said, I think it's a great idea to go do a man on street interview. Go do it. But ask the questions that puts you in a place where this is not about, I don't know, ask them if their vote, don't ask about election integrity, ask if your vote counts. I don't think people think their vote counts because the first thing I saw on this Chitterelli thing is I don't, and honestly, I had the same reaction myself was really all of Newark and 50 of their friends showed up to come and vote. Really? That's a real thing? I think that's going to have to be unpacked, but I don't think anybody's going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. These machines need to be looked at. Voter integrity needs to, I hate that term. It's not integrity, it's cheating. Is there cheating going on? Let's stop. Do I think my vote counts? I can't tell you how many times I thought, well, somebody's going to throw the ballot box off the bridge as it's heading into downtown Houston to be counted because they know all our votes are Republican because of where I live. I mean, I live in a 85-15 district or area, maybe 90. I think it's 85 now. But the reality is, if I wanted to do, I'd throw the box right off the bridge and never get the votes to downtown to be counted. Nobody would know. So do I think my votes are counted? I don't know. I was going to get a snorkel and go under the bridge and see how many voter boxes were under there. I'm being funny as I say that, but I mean, this is the world we live in. So as I unpack this, I think that the consultants that advised any candidate to stay away from Donald Trump should never have another gig as they're like Karl Rove people. Karl Rove's another one. He's another, he's an old school Republican. And I think there's a whole new group of Republicans that are really the Reagan Democrats, the Blue Dog Democrats, the Republicans that are conservative. And what we mean when they say conservative is, yes, we want to be fiscally conservative, but we don't want government in our lives. And I think if you ask the left, a lot of them would say they don't like the government either. So, with all of that said, why are we all not on the better team here? This redistricting bill to get even with the redistricting in Texas is also ridiculous. And I think that if this is handled right, that's not going to be allowed to stand. You can't go redistrict your state so that you cut off another state. All right. And when you understand what happened, I want to tell you something. I live in a district that is gerrymandered. And what it did is it took all the Republicans and put them in the same area. So not to impact the city of Houston too much. Okay. So I'm not talking about it on a congressional level. I'm talking about it the city of Houston. Literally, they adjoined us with a district with an area of Houston that takes me at least 45 minutes an hour to drive through is because there's a little stream that connects two waterways, which has allowed them to take all the Republicans and put them in one District E for the city of Houston. So we didn't mess up the city of Houston. So they got our tax dollars, but they didn't give us the right to vote and give us the right assignments of councilmen. All right. And so we've had that. So I live in a gerrymandered district, and it was gerrymandered by Republicans, like to put all the Republicans together so they didn't impact the rest of the city of Houston. The other thing they did was Harris County, they put the way they drew the lines in Harris County, they gerrymandered that, and they put all the Republicans in precinct 3, so they were able to have a majority on the Houston City Court. So don't tell me that the Republicans are the only ones gerrymandering. We had our county judge flip the whole district simply to cause a Democrat to be elected in it. So as they much as everybody's screaming about redistricting, no, really what it is we're calling you out on what you have done. You're the one that has gerrymandered districts for a very long time, and it needs to stop across the country. Let the chips fall where they may. You don't group people in the way that they're going to be grouped so that you win a congressional seat. So to say, well, I'm going to redistrict California so that I get 5 seats to offset the 5 seats that Texas is going to pick up, it should be Texas was put back the way it should be. They basically broke up the districts and said these 20,000 people are together. These 20, we're not going to connect neighborhoods by a stream, by a little tiny sprig of water running through somewhere to take two neighborhoods that are literally in driving distances from each other, 45 minutes to an hour. One is down here in Houston and one is up here. And the only thing that's joining it is a little tiny stream. That's the way they quantified it. You can't do that. All right. You can because they've done it, but it's not the right thing to do. So I'm hoping that they can fix the gerrymandering across the entire country, because don't make no mistake, these districts are not drawn properly. Okay. And they're using it to manipulate Congress. When you have Massachusetts is 40% Republican, I know that comes as a shock. They have zero Republican House of Representative members. Why? Because they gerrymandered the district so that it was 100% blue people. Okay. That is not right. Those 40% people deserve representation just as much as everybody else. So when I look at this election, walking away from America first, it was a big mistake. The one guy that did lean into Trump, he lost by 1 percentage point. Um, this Mandami, that's a whole nother thing. I do not understand how Brooklyn went for Mandami. I mean, do we not understand Ishmael and Abraham? I mean, seriously. And I think this is the problem. Brooklyn's mostly working families, and Mandami's rhetoric went out over for working families and working families that life is just too expensive for. Um, but I'm really shocked when I see Brooklyn coming out for Mandami. It's very disturbing to me, for a lot of reasons. When you start to look at the inner neighborhoods of this, it's just really, again, knowing New York politics, knowing New Jersey, New York, I'm floored when I see that. Um, there's like a road that I don't want to go down today. So anyway, with all of that said, America first, the American family first is a winning message. The candidates that did that, whether they believe that, whether they're going to execute that, whether they're going to do that, the ones that said that are the ones that won their elections. Um, and I think we're going to have a lot to criticize. But guess what? The midterms start today, and the Republicans better wake the heck up or they're going to get wiped out. Period. So they need to be addressing voter issues. They need to make sure that the sanctity of the vote is still there. They need to be addressing the families and the issues that affect families. And I don't care if Donald Trump supports it or not. You don't run away from something. He showed you the playbook to win. Use the playbook. And if you don't, we're going to go back to a different time where the Republicans were completely ineffective because he can't run for office anymore. So everybody better wake up and get on board and stop the, oh, well, I don't like the way he talks and I don't like the what he says. And you know what? Go to New Jersey for a year and you'll be fine with what he says because he doesn't say anything that they don't say up there on a regular basis. I say it down here, people laugh, because they just think I'm funny. Um, but just get a grip and get out there and get it done. So I'm not, I hope the Republicans at large use this as a wake up call. Good job to the Democrats for manipulating the system to their favor. Um, and let's go. We've got another year of worth of what this is, and it is going to be a busy year. The primaries are coming here in March, and we better all be on it in what we do. What I will say is we're going to talk about Dwight Boykin a little bit and see what we can do to get him support. I do think that he is the best person for the job out of the remaining people. And I will do a little bit of a dive on Amanda Edwards and Christian Menefee so that you guys have some information on that, so that we can make good decisions. Being there's no more Republicans in the race, I think the Republicans in the city of Houston need to get behind Dwight Boykin 100%. I mean, I don't expect the HERP to come out and do it, but I think that sort of what we did with Mayor Whitmire, we need to do the same with Boykin. What I will say is nobody voted for Martina Dixon. Only 800 people or something like that. It was really a small amount. So I'm good with that. That probably is her friends in the country club. Kingwood Country Club is what voted for her. It's fine with me. She didn't win. That was the important thing. That lady should never be near an elected office ever again. All right, that's all I've got to say. I probably said way too much today. This is Beth Guide with Talking Purple, and I will see you later this week.